And let's get going. First of all, I want to welcome you on behalf of the AACRL to this webinar. We're very excited. We've got some wonderful folks from Samford University who are going to be sharing their experience and their expertise with us on assessment. Um, I think, to be very honest with you, what struck my attention about this is that we are looking at, folks from various areas of the library and how they interact and things like this. And I think it speaks well to show how assessment doesn't affect one or just a particular area in a library, but it affects us all. Um, as I say, I have muted everyone for the time being. We are going to have questions at the end, and I will unmute everyone. At that point, you are welcome to chat using your, for questions or anything like that. I will attempt to monitor the chat for our folks. If you have, a problem, if I've not unmuted you or something like that, just raise your hand and I will try to do something again. And with that note, I am going to turn it over to Dean Kim Herndon, who is from Samford University. So anyway, thank you, and give me 1 second while I turn it over. There we go, Kim. I am turning it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating and joining us today. I'm a little reticent to say I'm an expert by any means with assessment, but we do have experience, so we're always happy to share that. This slide here is self-serving in that I started at Samford in 2008, and so that's where the story begins for me. And it made sense to start there because in coming to Samford, I learned a lot about their assessment and what was important for their learning goals. And they had 4 transformative learning abilities identified, and information literacy was one of those. And that was very appealing to me, and it seems like there would be many opportunities to work across campus to not just measure information literacy, but other opportunities for impacting learning across campus. So where I came from, we had been using the Nichols 5-column model, and that model this is a graphic table model of that. It starts the loop and it ends the loop. Your objectives, how that's linked back to your strategic plan or your mission, your criteria for success, how you plan to measure that, the results, and then how you're going to use those results. And that's always the critical piece, is the use of results. How are you going to use that to improve? And it can even be, we didn't find what we thought, or this failed terribly, but you can still use that as a result and go back and redo. And so that's always important to remember. But for the department chairs here at Samford, rather than trying to use that table model, I just went with a narrative model. This still has all of those same elements as you're seeing on the screen, hopefully. And it just, again, has all of those same elements. And it was easier, based on the way Samford was doing assessment at the time, to have the department chairs put this in a narrative format, and then I could go back and use, put this into the resource that Samford was using, which happens to be SharePoint. And we'll look at that in a minute. Another great resource is, of course, Standards for Libraries in Higher Education, and looking at your objectives and how to write objectives and how to measure them. And some of you I see that are attending today came to the NAIL AACRL assessment workshop, and you got this document. And then this other book, Viewing Library Metrics for Different Perspectives, Inputs, Outputs, and Outcomes, that's a resource that I purchased for all the department chairs and gave them so they could refer back to that as they're working each year through their outcomes and objectives. Samford was, in 8 years, we've had 3 different schedules and 2 different resources to collect this information. This is the current schedule we are using. When I get this from our assessment vice provost, it does not have the library departmental assessment reports due, I go back and put that in and then hand this back out to my department chairs because I need to back it up so that they can get the narrative to me and we can discuss it at the appropriate time. The first resource Samford was using was SharePoint, as I mentioned. I do not recommend that ever. So if you look at this, it's you have all the data here, but what SharePoint never could do was provide reporting opportunities. All I could do is get this static printout, and then I could not report and map back to institutional goals, institutional learning goals, institutional strategic goals. And that was a real hindrance, and it affected the ability to communicate back to the departments, to the schools, to the community in general. And so that does not lead to a culture of assessment. And again, these are just illustrative. So to the point today, we now have changed those transformative learning abilities into institutional learning outcomes. So the elements are still there: information literacy, writing, speaking, communicating. And that's the institutional learning outcomes. They've got a little more meat to them, which actually makes it easier to write assessments for them, in my opinion. And we've also moved to Taskstream, and some of you may use Taskstream or some other third-party resource, but I picked this slide because I wanted you to see the screenshot of where you can say Samford University Institutional Learning Outcomes, Information Literacy, and then that can map back from the information with the goals and outputs that we have put in for the library. Now this is our first year using this, so you can see we're under the co-curricular, but again you can see the mapping. And not only can I see this, the provost can see this. The vice provost for assessment can turn this on for other departments to see, or she can simply generate the report and send it to them. And this is exciting to me for, obviously for information literacy, but for the strategic learning, for the strategic plan also. There are places that the library plugs into that, and I would like to see those reports so we can see the impact we have in different ways with regard to stewardship, with regard to reaching out to the community. So having the right tools is always crucial when you're trying to do assessment. Here's just another screenshot of what that looks like with your evidence attached. So my part today was to just kind of give you where we came from when I got here and where we are moving on to. Now I'm going to turn over to Jennifer Taylor, who is chair of our special collection, and she's going to talk about 3 different areas in the library and some of their assessment outcomes and the results of those assessments. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn this over to you now. All right.
All right, so can everybody see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, okay. Hey everyone, like Kim said, I'm going to talk to you today about the 3 different areas in our library. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the assessment done in usage for the circulation department. So using the Nichols model outlined for us by our dean, this is an example of an administrative outcome report from the circulation department regarding the library hours assessment. So for this project, we knew that Samford was intentionally growing enrollment, particularly in our entering freshman class, as well as in new programs for the College of Health Sciences. This, in addition to some academic calendar changes, this prompted us to review our current operational hours. So in gathering supportive information for our intended outcome, we used data from daily gate counts, which gives the total number of the people in the building for each day, plus a number, the numbers from our hourly patron counts, which details the number of people on each floor of the building, in addition to some information we gathered from focus groups to identify days and times to increase the number of operational hours that we felt were most needed by our Samford students. So this resulted in a 5% increase in the number of hours that we are open each week. So for the daily gate counts, we used an Excel spreadsheet to track the total number of patrons per day, then calculated a semester average for each day of the week. A comparison of the last 2 years shows a large increase in the usage from the 2015 year to the 2016 year. We also gathered information with hourly patron counts to track the number of patrons on each floor. We collected this data during the last 4 open hours on each day. This helped inform us about student usage habits, since each floor of our building is used in different ways. So our third floor is designated a quiet study floor. The second floor of the building tends to be used more for group study. The first floor of the library has mostly group study tables, but it also has an Einstein's Brothers Bagels, and the lower level is mostly a large computer lab and the archive. So we wanted to see how those floors varied. So we used the hourly patron counts to determine a semester average for each hour of the day that we counted. This enabled us to compare numbers and identify trends from semester to semester. This is where we saw growing numbers for Friday and Saturday afternoons, which prompted us to add the additional hours for those evenings. We are going to continue to collect data for each of these counts and evaluate usage of these additional hours at the end of the spring semester for 2017. So in the next slides, I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about how the acquisition department assessed staff time and taking in some donations. So in the fiscal year for 2016, one of the goals of the acquisitions department was to use workflow analysis to determine time spent on tasks. Our supposition was that too much time was being spent on processing donations, which resulted in little being added to the collection itself. So we used the workflow analysis and Lib Analytics to do this. 2 staff members in the department logged all their time and activities in for this. We also used Trello.com to better maintain control of donation processing. So we determined that staff spent 22 to 36% of their time each week on donation. That's an amount of time equaling about 5.8 hours of 5.8 employee weeks in the course of 1 year. So that's a lot of time. So statistics compiled in Excel indicated that only 10% of those titles received in donation were actually being added to the collection. So in response to that data and analysis, the library gift policy was rewritten to become more selective and more donor-centered. We determined to do a better job limiting those donations, and we determined that staff time could be better spent. One staff member in acquisitions retired last year, and that position was not replaced. The new gift policy stresses what types of materials we accept and which we do not. It also asks donors to provide title lists and to check titles against the library catalog. We've begun saying no more often, recognizing that only 10% of donated items were actually making it into the collection, and staff time has been refocused, allowing the hours of one position to be used elsewhere in the library. Hours from the staff position which were not renewed are being used to supplement service hours in areas of the library which are more public. So now we're going to take a look at how assessment of collection use was done in the Special Collection Department and University Archives. So first of all, Special Collection houses 3 primary collections, and those collections are Samford History, Baptist History, and Alabamiana. The department is open to the public. However, the 2 primary communities that we try to focus our attention on are the Samford University community and the Alabama Baptist community. Our priority is the university because the university is who employs us. But Special Collection knew a large percentage of time was being spent assisting the Baptist community as well as outside researchers, which resulted in projects for the university going unfinished. We wanted to document who was using the collection and how they were using it in order to better understand how our resources, including our staff time, were being used. We set up types of data we wanted to collect using an analytic software, and every patron interaction was recorded. we decided to keep patron types somewhat broad because we knew the types of research being performed in the archive was often based on an institutional or a departmental need more so than a specific research paper. But we still document when students use us. We document students doing research papers by noting their departments and their academic schools. One of the things we realized in collecting this data was that people in the department were recording reference interactions differently. This became very frustrating when trying to figure out what the information we received actually meant. So it became very important to us to create a guide defining how data was to be recorded. So for each of the categories we were recording, we defined or gave examples for each of the options available. At the end of the academic year, we found 57% of the questions answered in the archives were from the Samford and Baptist communities. But we were also able to look at which of our collections were being used and who were using them. The chart on the right is an example of our Baptist collection. It breaks down patron use of just the Baptist materials in the collection, and that shows us that our time spent on processing Baptist materials, which is a lot of time we spend processing Baptist materials, we were able to see that that time was benefiting not only the Baptist community, but also it benefited our Samford students and faculty. In addition, by using the internal notes in the software, we were able to see what other scholarly activity was utilizing those materials. We also used the internal note so that we could note which books and articles and films had been researched here in the Samford collection, which is a great thing to be able to record on your assessment. As a result of our findings, we decided that we were going to update the collection's use policy and services to make sure we had a written statement online noting that while the public is welcome to use our materials, our primary communities must come first when there is an overlap in patron needs. This also included setting some boundaries on what research we can perform by the archival staff for distant researchers that are not affiliated with the university. We also increased our research requests and digitization fees for those outside researchers. The assessment results of the collections provided valuable statistics demonstrating staff needs to adequately service the department. Basically, we used these results to provide the evidence to demonstrate the need for staff positions. So next up, we have Ed Cherry, our systems librarian, to talk about assessment based on student login information to library resources.
Okay, so Samford, the library uses EasyProxy to allow off-campus users to access our licensed IP-restricted databases. Several years ago, we began requiring all users log in, even if they're on campus. Most of you probably know that this varies from normal practice at most EasyProxy sites. Part of what EasyProxy does is it creates an audit log that records username, date, time, and IP address of the users as they log in. So this slide shows what an audit log entry looks like. You can see the date, time, login and logout events, the IP address that the user came from, and their username, which I've anonymized. You'll note that this slide shows 3 different people logging in and logging out. Actually, we don't require them to log out, but their sessions time out after an hour of inactivity. But we can use that to infer the time that they stopped actively using our databases by backing up the logout time by an hour. For instance, the 5th and 6th lines, you can see it looks like just 9 seconds actively using the database. We gather this data over the course of a semester and send it to the university's Office of Institutional Effectiveness, which matches usernames with demographic data. Our institutional research analyst starts with that raw data and returns a spreadsheet with tabs containing these reports: student by college, department, major, level, class, and gender; undergraduate GPA by department, class, and major; students by race, ethnicity, athletic status, Greek status; faculty by department, and staff by department. All these reports show the percentage of the population who logged in at least once during the term, the average number of logins per user, the average time per session, and the average total time per username. Now, here's why we look at the data in those different ways. These three charts show the same group of students, but they show how many students logged in, how many times they logged in, and how long they were active. You can see that students in Classics top the charts in all three measurements. But look at how art students compare in each chart. Art students are among the least likely to log in, and at Samford at least, that's pretty typical among our students in lab, studio, or performance-related disciplines. Art students also logged in less frequently. But those who did log in spent the third highest time logged in over the course of the semester. Maybe we need to do more outreach to faculty in the art department. Do these students have research needs that the library isn't meeting, or that they don't know that the library can meet? The third chart suggests that these students, when they use our resources, are really using them. Or maybe it suggests that they're having trouble using them and could use some assistance in how to use our resources more efficiently. So this is a good example of how we get very different impressions from each of those different measurements. Now here's a look at GPA of undergraduates by class, grouped by the number of logins, the total time per login, and the time per session. In the first chart, you'll notice the poorest performing students at all levels logged in less than their classmates. With the exception of freshmen in the 2.5 to 2.99 range, the best performing students in every class logged in more often than their classmates. The third chart is the most counterintuitive to me. You'll notice that the middle-of-the-road students spend more time per session than either the best or worst performing students. Among the upperclassmen, especially juniors and seniors, students with a GPA below 2.0 spent 1/3 to 1/2 of the time of their peers. And students with a GPA higher than 3.5 also spent less time than students between 2.5 and 3.5. Why is that? Are they more efficient researchers? Based on the combination of the first and second charts, it appears that the best performing students log in more frequently but spend less time per session. Maybe they're more in tune with their own attention spans, or they take more breaks, but they spend more total time in smaller chunks than other students. So these charts are a great way to show that the library has an impact on student success. What do we do with this data? Our dean shares the information with the university's provost to demonstrate the library's important role and impact related to the university's learning and research goals and mission. Our associate dean prepares a department-specific annual report for each and every department across campus. These reports are typically 3 to 4 pages long. They draw from a number of sources, including circulation data, material orders, standing orders, subscription, etc., and this EasyProxy GPA data is also included with the other elements. Samford librarians serve as liaisons to our academic departments and schools. Several librarians highlight the information on how students in the department interact with our online resources. One librarian reported that after sharing this data with a department chair, the professor scheduled 2 instruction sessions for their senior students. From personal experience, I share this data with faculty in the departments I'm responsible for. I use it to encourage faculty members to make more use of our resources. I share comparison data to show how students in the department use or don't use e-resources compared with similar departments. One final note on what this data shows. When I presented my findings at a conference a few years ago, one of the attendees tweeted, "Samford U study, there is a correlation between library databases and higher GPA. Hashtag told you so. We believe this is true. We want it to be true, but it's still good to see evidence that it's true." Now I'm going to pass you along to Lauren Young to tell us about a library instruction assessment project.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren. I'm waiting to see, can y'all see my screen now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. As Ed so nice, I'm the instruction coordinator at Samford University Library. Instruction lives in the research and reference department. Little context about our instruction program at Samford. We generally lead about 205 classes during an academic year. Are provided for graduate
Lauren?
levels. Yes, ma'am.
This is Peggy. Your sound is coming in and out.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We provide about 220 classes academic year for both undergraduate and graduate students. We gather a lot of data using the SpringShare Lib Analytics products. We use those to have an instruction request form, student surveys, librarian surveys for after instruction, as well as faculty surveys for after instruction. These provide nice data that we can use for our annual reports and our assessment of the program. We assess via other means too. One such assessment is project sales test. So we administered the first test in 2011 to undergraduate students. We re-administered in 2014. And based on this, you'll see the outcome that's listed on this slide. And I'd like to note that this was actually drafted and tested before I joined the Samford team. So I was able to take the results and do some exciting things with the instruction program. So that's been a nice opportunity. The 2011 and 2014 test timeline allowed us to measure entering freshmen in 2011 and then measure them again on their information literacy proficiencies in 2014 as seniors. So we could gauge their growth and the different proficiencies during their academic tenure here at Samford. We could also find aggregate data about our population in general, which has been very useful. The results showed some weaknesses in some of the higher order information literacy proficiencies, to include source evaluation and legal, economic, and social issues. So when I began in this role in summer 2015, I analyzed a couple of specific items. One, what types of instruction were teaching faculty requesting? Were they requesting any of the higher order proficiencies or really just introductions to what we could offer through the library? The fear was that we would intercept freshmen at the beginning of their time here and give them a strong orientation to the resources that were available to them, but then lose them during some of those sophomore and junior years, and then re-encounter them as seniors working on capstones, not having done a lot of guided research with the benefit of a librarian helping. So it was as much of a reintroduction as it was diving deeper in some of the proficiencies. So that was one thing we wanted to look at. What were the teaching faculty actually requesting? The next thing that we took a look at is how did our instructional offerings affect these trends? So above you'll see listed our previous instruction offerings. On this page, you'll see I assigned each of our previous instruction offerings to one of the 5 AACRL standards, and this was sort of how they broke down. We did well through evaluate, but we only had one choice in use and 0 in legal and ethical concerns. So I applied these broad categories to information literacy instruction requests over 2 full academic years. Results here show very strong instruction evaluation, which was largely due to a valuable partnership between the library and the freshman communication arts courses, which are our introductory writing and research classes. So the big question was how to move our students up through those higher level standards and proficiencies. So we set upon drafting new information literacy class offerings. We took this as an opportunity to achieve 3 primary things. First, we use it as an opportunity to remove a few offerings that no longer represented our program initiatives. There were some things that were in there, as there may be at your institutions, that we felt no longer really benefited the students the way it might have previously. So we took this as an opportunity to go ahead and weed them out. We found this to be an opportunity to meet the needs of new departments and programs coming onto campus. We've heard already in this webinar about our rapid expansion and our in our College of Health Sciences programs. And it was also an opportunity to include more higher level information literacy proficiencies, which was sort of the original goal. So all of this work was done. I would draft things and run it by reference, run it by larger library faculty. We worked together to make sure that we were retaining things that were important to specific disciplines, as well as adding things that people felt comfortable teaching if requested from their liaison groups. We communicated this information out in marketing to our teaching faculty at the beginning of the fall 2016 year, so just this semester, with emails and our LibGuide for instruction. Another opportunity we took, sort of married along with our new instructional offerings, we drafted new pre and post surveys for students. We, rather than using another SpringShare survey, we utilized an existing institutional license to Qualtrics. The main effort was to write shorter, more impactful questions. We would find that we would have students that might encounter us 3 times as freshmen in that first semester, possibly in a CA class, maybe a biology 100, maybe a psychology 100. And the previous survey was fairly level snapshot. We felt like this may assess their need in a given subject more specifically rather than just them in general. And we really came to 3 specific assessment measures: the AACRL standards.
Lauren, we're losing you again.
The AACRL standards, RL frames, and the critical elements. Elements were included.
Lauren, we're losing your audio again.
I'm not sure why. Is that better?
Okay, I think it is.
Okay, great. So mapped to the 3 assessment measures of standards, frames, and critical thinking elements. Critical thinking elements were included because of our QA, which was focusing on critical thinking throughout the curriculum. And this just shows where each of the student learning for each of these 3 assessments has been mapped to the different survey questions. And these charts are to teach and posted instruction LibGuide in an effort to demonstrate the library's ability to contribute to and support their didactic and assessment efforts in the classroom. So reflections on this project. The standards, as most of us should know, were rescinded in July 2016. So I was very glad that I had incorporated the frames, since that's where things are moving to. So it's nice to have them there in a format where we can begin to create that bridge from one to the next and educating our teaching faculty about that change. I can share that we have had people select the new options for instruction. The end of year data will show us how effective we've been in trying to teach these out. I think it's important to analyze these types of changes over a full academic year, as some courses that might be delivered only in the fall or only in the spring might highlight different types of research needs for given programs and disciplines. And the third thing, I do have a next step for this project, and that would be to consider including time estimates for each of our new instructional offerings, so the teaching faculty will have a reasonable idea of how many of these integrate into a given class period. A great version of this where it was a menu where they actually took, like, instead of putting a price, they put a time, so one skill might be a 10-minute coverage and one might take 15, so that we can all be on the same page as what we can really cover in the time frame with their students. So this project has been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to working with it further. So that's all I have now. And we just thank you very much for attending and for learning a little bit more about what we're doing here at Samford.
Well, thank you. Gosh, I'm embarrassed to say I thought I knew assessment. I'm going to have to go back and revisit and see what else, because I feel like I'm not doing anything. So I appreciate you guys have done a heck of a lot I don't want to say a short period of time, but you've been doing a heck of a lot. What I'm going to do, folks, is I will unmute people and open up the floor for questions and comments. And if you have any trouble, let me know, and I will attempt to unmute you again. All right, everyone who has not self-muted should be open and able to talk. If you would, please, if you'll just let us know who you are and maybe where you're from when you ask your question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, this is Jessica Hayes. Can you all hear me okay?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So my question is to anybody who can answer it, but Kim was the one talking about it. And this is Jessica Hayes from Auburn University, Montgomery. Is Taskstream an institutional subscription, or did you guys get it specifically for the library, and can the library only use it? Or is it across the institution?
It's an institutional purchase. I mean, and it would have to be. It's very expensive, Jessica.
Yeah.
And so we don't even have all of the components that can come with it.
Mm-hmm.
But we did get the piece that allows, because there are pieces that Taskstream does specifically, so it automatically embeds SACS criteria, the core requirements and comprehensive standards,
Right.
so that as you're trying to create that compliance report, you can tell it where to look and how to pull that information in when you're doing that.
Well, that's really
And that's
fascinating.
not, there are others that kind of do that too, but Taskstream's kind of at the head as far as tracking back to SACS.
Awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
Kim, this is Peggy at UAB. You had posted, in fact, I had written it down, Trello.com. Is that, I take it that's a license as well, or is it open source, or?
It's open, it's free, and it's the resource that Lori used in acquisitions and collection management on the donors,
Yeah.
the donations and all of that. That's what she used kind of as a project management tool.
Okay.
So they could communicate and put their information there, and that was a way where she could collect all the data, and they could all be on the same page about how they were collecting it and how they were counting it and so forth.
When you changed your gift responses, did you, or your gift guidelines, did you get any pushback from folks, or was
No, because
everybody
we just
okay
ignore
with
it
it?
anyway, so it doesn't, you know. It just exists so that we can point back to it and say, yes, but we're not going to do this with it, or, you know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll ask another question if nobody minds. Lauren, who was the instruction statistics that you did and tying it back that way was fascinating. Was it started when you got there? Or did somebody else start it?
There definitely had been a lot of data collection and assessment of the instruction program, but that was actually something that I came in and talked about in my interview. Actually, was trying to tie the things and aligning our different formats and the questions and things like that to didactic standards that teaching faculty would recognize. So I used, for example, in the interview, I talked about Bloom's taxonomy. It was something that we all have in common. It's a shared language between us and teaching faculty to show that we can work in this domain and do work in this domain too. So it was great to be here and to live through a full semester, a full fall of the current setup and see the strengths that were in it, and then see what we could maybe tweak a little to meet the emerging needs on campus. As our programs were growing and the outlook and the landscape of our students was changing somewhat based on these programs.
It's very interesting and very good. We need to do so. We are looking at doing something like that as well. So, thank you. I have one more question for Ed. When you did the EasyProxy and then passed it forward, did you have to go through like an IRB or anything like that, or did they strip out
Yes,
enough
I did go. The information that I get back from our OIE is not really personalized at all. It's aggregate data, but I did go through IRB and get IRB approval before I began this.
Okay. And has it been a year long, or how long have you been running did you run it where you were tracking the EasyProxy usage?
We are still doing it. We do it in semester-sized chunks. We began doing it in, I believe it was 2010 or 2011.
Okay.
When we first began doing it, we were following kind of the standard EasyProxy practice of not requiring on-campus users to log in. But we found that about over half, almost 2/3 of our use came from on-campus users, and so we didn't have any information on who they were. Now I think as we've grown our graduate programs, I think it's maybe 1/3 of our use comes from on-campus users. But by requiring them to log in, even if they're on campus, we're able to track uh, every time someone uses one of our databases.
Interesting.
And there is surprisingly little pushback from that new requirement to log in from on-campus users.
You read my mind. That was going to be the next question. I wasn't sure if they were, because like with our folks, they will sit down at a computer, log in to the computer using their what we call a Blazor ID and password. So can they just log in to any computer, or would they log in twice, or how did that work?
Well, our public computers in the library and also in the public computer labs across campus don't require you to log in before you begin using them.
Okay.
So the login prompt for EasyProxy is the first one they get, unless they go into our portal or Moodle or one of our other things. And I think really things like Moodle and even Facebook have conditioned users to log in before they get to the good stuff. More and more you're required, if you want to access your Facebook or your Twitter or your Banner or Moodle or whatever, you have to log in, and I think that's become more accepted, and it's less of an impediment, less of a barrier to use.
Yeah. Very good. There was a note that came through in the chat box, and I must admit, and I agree with it completely. What Jessica said, you guys are doing a great job. I knew I had heard through the grapevine that you guys were experts in assessment, and having listened to this and with this presentation, I will say you guys are doing fantastic work. And I don't know about anybody else, but I was sitting here scrambling down, writing things down, because now I know I've got a heck of a lot more to do.
Well, the final stamp, I guess, is we just got our compliance report back from SACS. We have our visit in March, and the library got nothing. We are doing fine, so.
That is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. We are very pleased.
Well, you should be. That's wonderful. Well, folks, I don't see anything in the chat box. What do you guys?
I'm so sorry, Peggy. This is Jessica again. I had a quick question.
Sure. Good.
For Ed, was this inspired? Was your decision to start tracking it inspired by Mary O'Kelly and her work at Grand Valley State University? I know they were doing something not very similar, but similar in that they were tracking the logins and the correlation between usage.
I can't remember if it was a Grand Valley study. There was another library that I don't think it was Grand Valley that had over a dozen, the number 16 or 17 comes to mind, different facets that they were tracking. It included circulation transactions, instruction sessions, logging in to use a computer, even swiping their card to enter the library. They were looking at so many different facets, different ways that users interact with the library, and some of those we don't have any way of tracking who walks into the library. We don't require logins on our public computers, but this was one that we could do, and we could get the data. And honestly, our circulation statistics have been kind of dropping over the last 10 years, so it seems like the print books that we have are less important, and our online resources are becoming more important for our users.
Right.
That's
Well, it's
interesting.
fascinating. Great.
Very
Thank you.
interesting. So this is Peggy again at UAB. So what are you guys going to do next? Just out of curiosity.
I guess our next biggest thing is we're going to be partnering, it would appear, with our QEP that'll be going forward, and it's looking at critical thinking and information literacy. So we'll be heavily
Wow.
involved in that.
Okay. So you guys will come back and talk to us when you get more information or start working on that so we can learn some more?
Certainly. Certainly.
Thank
And
you.
if you've got
Thank you.
anything to share, please let us know. We're just working through assessment. I don't believe there are true experts in assessment. So
I'll be very honest with you. To be, assessment to me is just, while I do what I can do with it, it just seems very overwhelming. And I know it's something that we always have to do as libraries and, librarians, but, it's like, you need to justify yourself, but, you know, trying to figure out a way that will be understood by the administration is always the interesting piece for me. So, but that's what I
true.
say.
And I would say one of the things I was introduced to early on was make a long list. Your library should have a long list of things that they're going to assess. And you pull out of that long list and you add to it. But you pull out each year, you kind of sit down and look at what do we need to, what makes sense for us to try to assess this year. And sometimes your previous year's assessment needs to be carried forward for another year or two, but it shouldn't carry forward for 10 years,
Okay.
So having that long list of things, and you could even break it down by, administrative, student services, or you can do public service or electronic resource. I mean, there are different ways you could break it down, but having that long list to go back to and have the conversation about can be helpful sometimes. Because if you do too much, then you can't really assess it well. And that's something to remember.
Kim, you have chairs of different departments. Does everybody just work together? Do you have like a committee or folks that are assigned to assessment or an assessment librarian, or is this just a general, everybody
Every
pitches in and helps?
every department chair is responsible for turning in their departmental assessment for their unit.
Okay.
And they turn it in. They work with their department and identify what their goals are going to be. And then it comes to me and I put it in. Now, since we have Taskstream, after we get through this SACS visit and I learn Taskstream a little bit better, I feel much more, it would not be an imposition, I don't think, to ask the department chairs to actually put it into Taskstream. But for this first year, I mean, we really just got it at the beginning of fall and had to get all the content in. And I was struggling to learn it. Why have 6 people learn it when one person can do it? I have the information in front of me and I can just put it in. But going forward, I'm going to have them do it.
Do you offer guidance as far as their goals for the next year? Or I guess do they come up with them? Do you guys come up with them as a unit or as a
They come
library?
up with it themselves and then they bring them and I look at them, and sometimes I
Okay.
offer them suggestions to make it stronger, or ask a hard question. Well, how are you really going to measure that? And is that a true measure? So sometimes I ask hard questions. Sometimes I don't.
Absolutely fantastic.
Somebody's laughing. I don't know who's laughing. But
Nobody's laughing. No one would ever do that. But
Lori's
now,
laughing. She's here. She's laughing.
well, I don't know about anybody else, but I have definitely learned quite a bit, and I appreciate it. I will ask this one last question. If any of us need to do any projects or have any questions, may we contact you guys?
Certainly.
Okay. I see your emails up there, but would you be willing to help someone else out and basically not give us the answer, but guide us through the process, because you guys have been doing a heck of a lot.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, folks, do we have any more questions? We are coming up on the 3 o'clock hour. I will tell you this, we will be looking forward to another assessment webinar sometimes the first of the year. We're looking at January, and it will be our colleagues at UA who have agreed to share from a different aspect what they are doing down there. Once again, I want to thank these great folks at Samford, their wonderful dean and chair of the special collection, and then of course Lori Northrup that I've worked with for a while with acquisitions and collection development, and Lauren Young, who did a wonderful job on instruction, and then of course Ed Sherry, and then Cheryl Sissel. So we humbly appreciate it. And as I say, I will sign off. We thank everybody for coming, and thanks again to our presenters. And we will see you again in hopefully January.
Thank you, Peggy.
you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.